Stop the auction. The voice rang through the town hall so suddenly that even the auctioneer froze with his gavel suspended in midair. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. More than 200 people sat shoulder to shoulder inside the old red brick courthouse, all waiting to witness the final chapter of a story they thought they already knew. At the center of it all sat Gloria Washington, 70 years old, silver curls peeking from beneath a worn church hat, hands folded tightly around a foreclosure notice that had been creased so many times the paper looked ready to tear apart. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long golden bars across the polished wooden floor, but Gloria barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed on the front of the room where the auctioneer stood beside a photograph of the small white house she had called home for nearly 3 decades. In just a few minutes, that house would belong to someone else. At least, that was what everyone believed. A low murmur swept through the crowd. Heads turned toward the courthouse doors. 3 black SUVs had just rolled to a stop outside. Their glossy paint reflected the morning light like mirrors. The doors opened one after another. 3 men stepped out, tall, confident, impeccably dressed. Strangers, as far as anyone in town knew. Yet something about them immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, the auction is already underway." The tallest of the 3 continued walking forward without answering. His polished shoes echoed against the hardwood floor. One step, then another. Every eye followed him. Gloria looked up, confused. She had never seen these men before. Or at least she thought she hadn't. The closer they came, the harder her heart seemed to pound. There was something familiar hidden behind those faces. Something buried beneath years she could no longer count. The tallest man stopped only a few feet away. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then his eyes began to glisten. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried years of memories behind it. "Miss Gloria," he said softly. The room went completely silent. Gloria blinked. Her brow furrowed. The voice felt familiar, like a song she had not heard in decades. The man swallowed hard. "You probably don't recognize me anymore." A strange feeling settled over the room. The mayor shifted in his seat. The bank representatives exchanged puzzled glances. Even the auctioneer lowered his gavel. Gloria stared at the stranger. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then the second man stepped forward. His expression carried the same warmth, the same emotion, the same unmistakable gratitude. And suddenly, somewhere deep inside her memory, a door cracked open. She saw flashes of scraped knees, school backpacks, tiny hands reaching for hers, birthday candles glowing in a dark kitchen. 3 hungry boys crowded around a small dinner table. Gloria's breath caught. Her eyes widened. The tallest man smiled again, tears now shining openly. "You gave 3 boys a home when nobody else wanted them." The entire courthouse fell still. And in that moment, Gloria Washington realized the 3 strangers standing before her were not strangers at all. The silence inside the courthouse felt almost unreal. Nobody seemed willing to move, afraid that even the smallest sound might break whatever moment had just arrived. Gloria Washington remained seated, her eyes locked on the 3 men standing before her. The foreclosure notice slipped slightly from her trembling hands and landed in her lap. For several long seconds, she could not find her voice. The tallest man finally knelt beside her chair. His expensive suit brushed against the old hardwood floor, but he did not seem to care. His eyes never left hers. "Miss Gloria," he said softly again, "you used to tell us that family is not about who shares your blood. It is about who stays when life gets hard." Gloria felt her chest tighten. She had spoken those words hundreds of times, maybe thousands. Late at night, around a tiny kitchen table. During difficult winters when the heating bill seemed impossible to pay. During mornings when 3 growing boys needed breakfast, and there was barely enough food for everyone. Slowly, the years began returning to her. Not as memories, as feelings. She remembered a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaking sink. She remembered working double shifts at the Maple Street diner. She remembered coming home exhausted and finding 3 little boys waiting by the window just to see her walk through the door. Back then, nobody understood why she kept saying yes. The first boy arrived when Gloria was 42 years old. A social worker had called asking if she could provide temporary care for a child with nowhere to go. Temporary became permanent. Then came another, then another, each one carrying a different story. each one carrying wounds nobody could see. People in town whispered behind her back. Some called her foolish. Others called her irresponsible. A few even suggested she was ruining her life. Gloria ignored every one of them. She never saw unwanted children. She only saw children who needed someone to believe in them. The second man stepped forward now. His voice shook slightly. "You remember the blue bicycle?" Gloria blinked. The question caught her off guard. Then she laughed softly through her tears. "The one with the crooked handlebars?" The man smiled. "You spent 3 weeks saving tips from the diner just so I could have it." Several people in the audience exchanged confused glances. They were hearing pieces of a story they had never known. The third man swallowed hard before speaking. "You used to leave the porch light on every night." Gloria nodded slowly. "Of course I did. Even when electricity was expensive." Her eyes softened. "Because I wanted you boys to know there would always be a light waiting for you." The room grew quieter somehow. Even the bank representatives seemed unable to look away. Gloria stared at the 3 men. She saw it now. Not the expensive watches. Not the tailored suits. Not the success written across their faces. She saw 3 boys sitting around a second-hand table. 3 boys laughing over pancakes on Sunday mornings. 3 boys who had once needed a home. Tears rolled down her cheeks as realization fully settled in. Isaiah, Noah, Caleb, they had come back. But one question still echoed in her mind. If they had returned after all these years, why now? And judging by the expressions on their faces, the answer was far bigger than saving a house. Isaiah glanced toward the auctioneer, then toward the rows of townspeople filling the benches. Many of those faces were familiar. Some had watched him grow up. Some had doubted he would amount to anything. Some had openly questioned Gloria's decision to take in children who did not belong to her. The memories returned with startling clarity. The smell of rain on cracked sidewalks. The sound of an old screen door creaking open. The warmth of a tiny house that somehow always felt bigger on the inside than it looked from the street. Isaiah smiled faintly. "You all see 3 successful men standing here today," he said. "But that is not where this story started." His voice carried through the courthouse. Nobody interrupted. Nobody even shifted in their seats. 27 years earlier, Isaiah had been 6 years old and terrified of trusting anyone. He barely spoke. He barely slept. Every time Gloria entered the room, he expected her to disappear like everyone else had. But she never did. Every morning she woke before sunrise, tied on her diner apron, and left breakfast waiting on the kitchen table. Every night she came home exhausted, yet somehow found enough energy to ask about homework, listen to worries, and remind 3 uncertain boys that they mattered. Noah stepped forward. "The funny thing is, we thought she was rich." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Gloria covered her mouth. Noah smiled. "Not because we had money. We did not. We thought she was rich because she always found a way to make things work." He looked down for a moment. "I did not learn until I was older that she skipped meals sometimes so we could have seconds." The laughter faded. Several people lowered their eyes. Noah continued. "I remember one winter when the furnace stopped working. We woke up freezing. By afternoon, she somehow had space heaters running in every bedroom." He paused. "Years later, I found out she sold her favorite wedding ring to pay for them." Gloria looked away quickly. She had never wanted the boys to know that. Caleb stepped beside his brothers. The youngest had once been the quietest. Now he carried himself with calm confidence. "When I was 10, I asked her why she kept helping us." His voice softened. "Do you know what she said?" Nobody answered. "She said every child deserves someone who stays." The words settled over the room like sunlight through stained glass. Even the bank manager sitting near the front seemed unable to look away. Caleb smiled at Gloria. "I spent years trying to understand that answer." His eyes glistened. "Now I do." Gloria felt tears gathering again. She remembered that conversation. She remembered the small backyard, the broken lawn chair, the summer evening breeze moving through the trees. She had spoken those words without realizing how deeply they would stay with him. The courthouse clock ticked quietly in the background. Outside, sunlight reflected off the black SUVs parked along Main Street. Inside, something was changing. The auction was no longer the center of attention. The house was no longer the story. The people listening were beginning to realize that they had never truly known what Gloria Washington had sacrificed all those years. And judging by the documents Isaiah still held in his hands, the 3 men had not returned merely to tell old stories. They had come back carrying something far more important. Isaiah slowly lifted the thick folder he had been carrying since he entered the courthouse. The paper inside looked ordinary, yet the weight of it seemed to fill the entire room. He placed it carefully on the auctioneer's table. The auctioneer adjusted his glasses and glanced down. His expression changed almost immediately. First confusion, then surprise, then complete disbelief. A murmur spread through the crowd. "What is it?" someone whispered from the back row. Isaiah turned toward the audience. 3 weeks ago, we received letters from the woman who raised us. His voice remained calm, but emotion lingered beneath every word. Not one request for help. Not one complaint. Not one mention of what she was going through. Gloria lowered her eyes. She already knew where this was going. The letters had never been meant to bring anyone home. They had simply been goodbye letters disguised as words of encouragement. Noah reached into his jacket and unfolded a slightly worn piece of paper. The edges had been bent from being opened too many times. Mine said, "Noah, never forget how proud I am of you. Keep helping people. The world needs kind hearts." His voice cracked. He paused before continuing. "She never mentioned losing the house." Caleb held up another letter. Mine said, "You have already given me more happiness than I ever dreamed possible." He swallowed hard. She never mentioned the medical bills. The room fell silent again. Even the courthouse air felt heavier. Gloria sat motionless, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Sunlight reflected across the polished floor, catching tiny tears that shimmered in her eyes. Isaiah looked toward her. "Do you know what hurt the most?" he asked softly. "Finding out that the woman who spent her entire life carrying our burdens decided to carry hers alone." Several people in the audience looked away. A few quietly wiped their eyes. Isaiah turned back to the auctioneer. "Please continue reading the documents." The auctioneer cleared his throat. His hands visibly trembled as he reviewed the paperwork. The bank representatives leaned forward. One of them requested the file. Another quickly examined several pages. The expressions around their table shifted rapidly. Confusion became concern. Concern became astonishment. Finally, the bank manager stood. "This cannot be correct," he said. Noah stepped forward. "Actually, it is." The manager stared at him. Noah offered a small smile. "I checked every number myself," Caleb added, "and I had 3 independent firms verify everything before we arrived." The crowd exchanged puzzled looks. Nobody understood what was happening. The mayor rose from his seat. "Would somebody please explain?" Isaiah nodded. He glanced once more at Gloria before facing the room. "You all believe today is about saving a house." He paused. "It is not." The words landed like a stone in still water. Every person in the courthouse seemed to lean forward at the same time. Isaiah placed both hands on the table. "Because what we discovered after receiving those letters revealed something none of us expected." Gloria looked up sharply. Even she did not know what he meant. And for the first time since the 3 men had arrived, uncertainty appeared on her face. The courthouse remained perfectly still. Even the old ceiling fan seemed quieter as Isaiah's words settled over the room. Gloria sat frozen, her eyes moving from one son to the next. She had expected them to save her home. She had never expected a mystery. The bank manager adjusted his tie and looked down at the documents again. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "are you suggesting there is an error in the foreclosure process?" Isaiah exchanged a glance with Noah and Caleb. Then he nodded. "Not just an error." A ripple of whispers moved through the audience. The manager frowned. "What exactly are you saying?" Noah stepped forward holding a thin folder of his own. Unlike the thick legal documents on the auction table, this one looked old. The edges were faded. The paper inside had yellowed with age. "After receiving Gloria's letter, we started reviewing her finances," Noah said. "At first, we only wanted to understand how things had become so difficult." He paused. "Then we found something none of us were looking for." Gloria felt her heartbeat quicken. She had spent years managing every bill herself. Every receipt, every payment, every expense. What could they possibly have found? Noah opened the folder and carefully removed several documents. 23 years ago, Gloria purchased a small parcel of land on the north side of town. Several older residents exchanged confused looks. One elderly man suddenly leaned forward. "The old Miller property?" Noah nodded. "Exactly." A murmur spread across the room. Gloria blinked. She barely remembered that piece of land. It was only a few acres. Rocky soil. Nothing special. She had purchased it using savings she accumulated over years of work because someone had told her it might be useful one day. But life became busy. The boys needed school supplies, medical appointments, clothes, food. The property slipped from her mind. Caleb smiled gently. "Miss Gloria, do you remember why you bought it?" Gloria hesitated. Then she laughed softly through her confusion. "Because it was cheap." A wave of nervous laughter passed through the room. Caleb nodded. "That is true." Then his expression grew serious. "But what you did not know is what happened afterward." The mayor stood up completely now. "What happened?" Isaiah turned toward him. 5 years ago, a major transportation project was approved by the state. Several people immediately recognized what he meant. The new interstate expansion. The project that transformed entire sections of the county. The project that attracted businesses, warehouses, and millions of dollars in development. Isaiah placed another document onto the table. Part of that expansion passed directly through land Gloria still owned. Silence. Absolute silence. The bank manager's face lost color. The mayor slowly sat back down. Gloria stared at Isaiah as though she had misheard him. "That cannot be right," she whispered. Noah smiled gently. "We thought the same thing." He pointed toward the documents. "Until we verified everything." The sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows seemed brighter now. Dust particles floated through the golden beams. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Because if what Isaiah was saying was true, then the woman sitting in front of them was not merely losing a house. And the discovery the three brothers had uncovered was about to change everything anyone thought they knew about Gloria Washington. For a moment, nobody in the courthouse spoke. The only sound came from the faint ticking of the old clock mounted above the judge's bench. Gloria sat motionless, trying to process what she had just heard. The small parcel of land. The forgotten paperwork. The purchase she barely remembered making. It felt impossible. Isaiah opened another folder and carefully spread several maps across the auction table. Colored lines crossed sections of the county. Survey markers. Development zones. Transportation routes. Years of planning laid out in precise detail. When the state approved the interstate expansion, Isaiah explained, they began acquiring nearby properties for commercial development. He pointed to a highlighted section. "This is Gloria's land." Several people rose from their seats to get a better look. The mayor stepped closer. The bank manager followed. Their expressions grew more serious with every passing second. Noah adjusted his glasses and added, "The property was never properly transferred, never sold, and never claimed by anyone else. It remained in Gloria's name the entire time." Gloria slowly shook her head. "But if that is true, why did nobody contact me?" Caleb looked down briefly before answering. "That is exactly the question we asked." The room fell silent again. Sunlight poured through the courthouse windows, illuminating tiny particles of dust drifting through the air. Outside, the town continued its normal routine, completely unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding inside. Isaiah handed another document to the mayor. The mayor scanned the page. His eyes widened. Then he looked at Gloria. Then back at the page. "This valuation cannot be accurate," he whispered. Noah nodded. "We hired independent appraisers." The mayor continued reading. 3 separate firms. The bank manager swallowed hard. "What valuation?" someone called from the audience. Nobody answered immediately. The silence itself seemed to become part of the answer. Finally, the mayor lowered the document. His voice came out softer than before. "The land is worth substantially more than anyone realized." A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Gloria stared at him. She still did not understand. For years she had worried about grocery bills, utility payments, medical expenses. She had clipped coupons and stretched every dollar. The idea that she might own something valuable felt completely disconnected from the life she knew. Caleb walked over and gently placed a hand on the back of her chair. "Miss Gloria, when we discovered this, we thought our first job was to save your house." He smiled. "Then we learned saving the house was the smallest problem we needed to solve." Several people exchanged confused glances. Isaiah looked toward the bank representatives. "Because once we completed our investigation, we uncovered something else." The manager immediately stiffened. The mayor slowly turned toward him. Noah closed his folder and exhaled. Something that should never have happened. Gloria's heart began to race. The room seemed smaller now. More crowded. More tense. Isaiah lifted one final document from his briefcase. Unlike the others, this one carried official state seals across the top. He placed it carefully on the table. Then he looked directly at the bank manager. Would you like to explain why multiple notices regarding Gloria's property never reached her? The color drained from the manager's face. And suddenly, every person in the courthouse realized the story was no longer about an auction at all. The bank manager opened his mouth, but no words came out. The confidence he had carried all morning seemed to disappear beneath the weight of the document resting on the table. Every eye in the courthouse remained fixed on him. The sunlight that had felt warm only minutes earlier now seemed sharp and exposing. Isaiah stood quietly, waiting. Noah folded his arms. Caleb remained beside Gloria's chair, his expression calm but determined. Finally, the manager cleared his throat. There must be some misunderstanding. The statement sounded weak even to him. The mayor immediately extended his hand. May I see that document? Isaiah nodded and slid it across the table. The mayor reviewed the pages carefully. His eyes moved line by line. Then he stopped. A deep crease formed across his forehead. He turned another page. Then another. The room grew so quiet that people could hear the rustle of paper. Gloria sat motionless. Her heart felt caught somewhere between confusion and disbelief. She had spent years believing her troubles were simply bad luck. Medical expenses, rising costs, falling behind. She never blamed anyone. She never complained. She simply worked harder and accepted what life gave her. Yet now something else was emerging, something she had never imagined. The mayor slowly lowered the papers. These notices were issued over 4 years ago. A ripple swept through the crowd. He looked directly at the bank manager. Several were returned as undeliverable. The manager shifted uncomfortably. That can happen. The mayor did not look convinced. Then why was no follow-up investigation conducted? No answer came. Noah stepped forward and placed another file beside the first one. Because we asked the same question. He opened the folder. Inside were copies of property records, certified mail logs, county filings, and communication requests. Months of research carefully organized. Every official notice regarding the development project was sent to an outdated mailing address. Several people gasped quietly. Gloria blinked. An old address? Noah nodded. An address you stopped using more than 20 years ago. Gloria struggled to understand. But my current address has always been on file. Exactly, Isaiah said. Which means somebody failed to update the records correctly. The mayor's expression darkened. The bank manager stared at the floor. Caleb looked around the courthouse. Meanwhile, development continued. Property values increased. Compensation offers were issued. Yet the rightful owner never received any of it. The audience erupted into whispers. People exchanged stunned looks. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked toward Gloria with growing sympathy. The realization was spreading through the room. The woman everyone thought was losing everything may have actually been denied information that could have changed her life years ago. Gloria felt tears gathering again. Not because of money, not because of the house, but because she suddenly understood why her sons had rushed home the moment they received her letters. This was never about charity. This was about justice. Then Isaiah reached into his briefcase one final time and removed a sealed envelope bearing the logo of the State Transportation Authority. He placed it carefully in front of Gloria. The moment the mayor saw the seal, his eyes widened. And for the second time that morning, the entire courthouse fell silent. Gloria stared at the sealed envelope resting on the table in front of her. The state logo seemed almost unreal beneath the courthouse lights. Her fingers hesitated before touching it. For years, envelopes had brought nothing but bills, warnings, and difficult choices. This one felt different. Around her, the entire room waited. The mayor, the bank, representatives, the auctioneer, neighbors who had known her for decades. Even the reporters who had quietly arrived during the commotion stood frozen with notebooks in hand. Isaiah gently pushed the envelope closer. Go ahead, Miss Gloria. His voice was soft, the same way he used to speak when he was a little boy asking for help with homework at the kitchen table. Gloria carefully opened the seal. The paper inside crackled softly. She adjusted her glasses and began reading. At first, her expression showed only confusion, then surprise, then disbelief. Her hand started to tremble. Noah immediately leaned closer. Miss Gloria? She could not answer. Her eyes moved across the page again, then again. Finally, she looked up. Tears filled her eyes. This cannot be right. The mayor stepped forward. May I? Gloria silently handed him the letter. He read it slowly. Halfway down the page, his posture changed. By the time he reached the final paragraph, he removed his glasses completely. The courthouse erupted into whispers. The mayor looked toward the audience. The state has completed a review of the property records. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. The compensation funds associated with the transportation development were never properly delivered to the legal property owner. The room grew even quieter. As a result, all unpaid compensation, accrued adjustments, and additional settlement payments have now been approved. The bank manager sank back into his chair. Noah slowly exhaled. Caleb closed his eyes for a brief moment. Years of work had finally led to this. Gloria looked from face to face. She still seemed unable to process what she was hearing. The mayor continued reading. The total amount exceeds $4 million. A collective gasp swept through the courthouse. Several people covered their mouths. One woman in the back row began crying openly. The auctioneer lowered his gavel onto the table and simply stared. Gloria sat motionless. $4 million. The number felt meaningless to her. She had spent years measuring life in grocery budgets, utility bills, and careful savings. The amount was larger than anything she had ever imagined. Isaiah knelt beside her chair once again. You spent your life making sure we never felt abandoned. His eyes glistened. Today we wanted to make sure you never felt forgotten. Tears rolled down Gloria's cheeks. The sunlight pouring through the courthouse windows seemed warmer now. Softer. Almost golden. For the first time that morning, the fear that had weighed on her shoulders began to lift. But Isaiah was not finished. He looked toward the crowd and smiled. And that is only the beginning of what we came here to do. Suddenly, every head in the courthouse turned back toward him, because whatever came next seemed important enough to make 3 successful men cross the country and stop an auction with only seconds to spare. Isaiah looked around the courthouse one final time before turning back toward Gloria. The sunlight pouring through the tall windows illuminated the tears on her cheeks, and the smile she had tried unsuccessfully to hide. For years she had carried every burden alone. Now, for the first time, she was no longer standing by herself. Isaiah reached into his jacket and removed a small wooden box. It was simple, unpolished, almost ordinary. Yet Gloria immediately recognized it. Her hand flew to her mouth. No, she whispered. Caleb smiled. Yes. Noah carefully opened the box and placed it in her lap. Inside sat an old brass house key attached to a faded blue ribbon. Gloria stared at it in disbelief. Decades earlier, when the boys were still young, she had tied that ribbon onto the spare key to help them find it after school. Every afternoon they would race home, unlock the front door, and wait for her to finish work. The ribbon had long ago faded from bright blue to pale gray, but seeing it again felt like opening a doorway to another life. Isaiah knelt beside her chair. You spent years giving us a home. His voice softened. Now it is our turn to protect yours. The room remained silent as Noah stepped forward holding another folder. 3 months ago, before we even knew about the compensation settlement, we purchased every remaining debt attached to the property. Gloria blinked. Noah smiled. The mortgage balance is gone. Caleb added, the medical bills are gone too. Fresh tears rolled down Gloria's face. She shook her head slowly, overwhelmed by a reality she never thought possible. Yet Isaiah still was not finished. He turned toward the audience. Miss Gloria taught us something that changed our lives. He paused. She taught us that every child deserves someone who stays. Several people nodded quietly. Many remembered hearing those words throughout the years. Isaiah continued. That is why the 3 of us have created the Gloria Washington Foundation. A wave of surprise moved through the room. Noah opened another document. The foundation will provide housing assistance, educational support, and mentorship programs for children in foster care throughout the county. Caleb smiled warmly. Because no child should feel unwanted. The courthouse erupted into applause. Not loud, not wild, just sincere. The kind that comes from hearts that have been deeply moved. Gloria covered her face as emotion overwhelmed her. For years she had worried whether her sacrifices had mattered, whether the long shifts, the sleepless nights, the endless struggles had truly made a difference. Now the answer stood right in front of her. 3 grown men. 3 lives transformed. 3 sons who had come home. Hours later, The courthouse finally emptied. The reporters left. The officials departed. The auction was officially canceled. Outside, the afternoon sun hung low over Main Street, painting everything in warm gold. Gloria sat on the front porch of her little white house, the same porch where she had once waited for 3 boys to come home from school. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. Isaiah, Noah, and Caleb sat on the porch steps below her, just as they had done countless times as children. Nobody spoke. No words were necessary. Gloria looked at the 3 men and smiled. Then she rested her hand gently on the old brass key in her lap. The porch light above the door flickered on as evening approached. And for the first time in many years, the woman who had spent her life making sure others never felt abandoned finally understood that she never would be either.